From boardrooms to break rooms. If it's business, it matters. Welcome to another episode of Business Matters, where we discuss matters of importance to businesses. I am your host, Patricia White. In today's episode, the importance of quality leadership, psychological safety, and avoiding toxicity at work is what we will be discussing. Leadership defines the culture of every organization. It influences trust, engagement, innovation, and ultimately the emotional health of employees. Yet, in too many workplaces, poor or performative leadership erodes confidence and creates environments where fear and silence take root. Today, we'll discuss what true leadership looks like, how toxicity manifests, and why psychological safety is vital to a healthy, productive, and sustainable organization. Joining me in discussion today is Ms. Kimberly Stout. Kimberly is an accomplished HR management professional with over 14 years of progressive experience. Currently serving as Group HR Manager with a leading local organization, Kimberly has a deep love for people and driving business success. Her career spans diverse industries, having successfully led the HR function in a large multinational corporation, the retail sector, and several local enterprises in a management consulting capacity. Kimberly is dedicated to fostering positive workplace cultures through integrity, excellence, and a results-oriented approach. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you, Patricia.
So, Kimberly, thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
We've often heard the term about called quality leadership, and we know that that encompasses being intentional in how you treat people, leading with emotional intelligence and integrity. Considering all of this, what are some of the early warning signs that leadership in an organization is poor or ineffective?
So early warning signs are when employees who usually care stop speaking up, stop being a part of any initiatives. They go quiet for protection of themselves.
What are some of the other things that you see creeping in other than that?
There's lack of empathy coming from the leaders, so those persons tend to shy away from offering their initiatives, offering input to situations. They go to meetings and have less to say, or they answer thinking this is what the leader wants to say.
So for the benefit of our viewership, can you define what performative leadership would look like?
So performative leadership are persons who, in the public's eye, say one thing and in the background does the opposite. For example, we have leaders who in the forefront, whether it's via social media to promote the business or when outsiders are looking on, talk about mental health safety. However, in the background, this is not practiced within that organization. So have you experienced this in any organization you have worked with?
I certainly have, sometimes too many to count. You usually find those type of leaders are the ones who champion certain causes. So you would see them champion things like emotional intelligence, they champion mental health, well-being, like you mentioned earlier. And oftentimes they never live that. It is only done really for the public to present an image. I will call to mind an article written by Dr. Rochelle Haynes. I saw it come across my LinkedIn timeline, and I found her piece to be very timely because what it did was highlight some of the experiences that I have had and I've known other leaders to have had that they've shared about a leader who championed. She talked about a former leader she had, an HR head actually, who championed mental health in the public sphere, yet did the total opposite when dealing with her, to the point where that leader essentially, when she questioned certain things, that leader used the workplace policies to, they weaponized them to more or less retaliate against her speaking out. And too often we see that happening.
Yeah, we do.
Yes. So I want to also talk now too about how language and tone and and informal power structures can contribute to psychological harm. So tell us how you believe that language and tone can contribute to the psychological harm in organizations where this occur.
It would reduce trust, destroy it actually. It will stop persons from communicating. It comes over like whatever tone or sarcastic remarks or comments that leaders use would break down the trust within any organization and employees.
So we've often heard the term workplace bullying, and we hear that a lot now on social media and all around. So it's kind of a hot button now, a hot button topic. But what happens when the bully is the leader or at the zenith of the organization? What does that do to an organization and the people that work in the organization?
One, it again is toxic. It makes those persons who want to feel psychologically safe. You don't know what person is going through at home. So being comfortable at work can be that out for that person. And if the leader is toxic, it trickles down. The person's reporting to them becomes toxic. And then it pushes those persons who want to be a part of an organization that leads with integrity and empathy, push them into a corner. Those persons may end up leaving the organization because it is taxing mentally and psychologically on them. So you get persons leaving that organization. Sometimes persons go quiet because maybe they don't feel as though they can find something soon enough because of obligations they may have. So they tend to try to work through it, even though it may be having a slight impact, not noticeable as yet, on them.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that. So essentially what happens is that that person then ends up having to solve the problem themselves,
Yes.
more or less, by leaving, right? Which is really not how it should be.
No, because then you leave that leader behind to impact others.
Right. Yeah. What does it say for the brand of the organization too? Well, how do you think that augurs for the brand?
It will eventually dampen the brand if it is a brand that's very popular. That word travels, Barbados is so small. Word of mouth travels quickly. And I mean, we now are finding persons more free and comfortable to communicate via social media. Nobody's afraid anymore to say anything on social media. So it will eventually kill that brand. Persons will avoid going to that organization and applying and even working or even thinking about it.
Yeah, I could see that happening. I actually can call to my son that has happened.
Yeah, me too.
With and they now have difficulty with recruitment. So we mentioned about the leader being at being the bully, or at the zenith of the organization being the bully. What do you think is the cause for this, for leaders, for poor leaders who do things like this, to go unnoticed and unaddressed? What aids in that?
Their performance. So I can call to mind an experience, not personally, but I've observed in an organization I worked with, a leader who was very performative, great with numbers, and because of this, their leader ignored the signs and the reports, because there were reports too of their toxic behavior. And that was very frustrating. I could have seen the frustration in persons who had to put up with it. Persons would have gone unnoticed with how they were handling it mentally. Some persons went on sick leave. Persons tried to cry out, but because their leader was ignoring it because of their performance, it went unaddressed, and unaddressed too long.
So essentially what you're saying is that because that leader who was toxic had other good elements about them, the organization more or less ignored the behavior,
Yes.
ignored that central behavior that was creating a lot of issues within the organization. All too often you see that. And I will say to you that what that points to is a lack of proper governance.
Yes.
Right? A lack of proper governance. So I know it also it impacts upon how people report these things too, because we know we're in a small society like Barbados, and we know word travels, as you said before, so it does not only travel among the job seekers, but it travels among the HR practitioners and leaders and the persons responsible for making hiring decisions. To what extent would you say that that kind of culture in Barbados, the small society and the word traveling culture, to what extent would you say that it makes it more difficult for employees to report or challenge leaders who are toxic?
Because they feel like there's no outlet. Like, why should they report it? What's going to happen? They have that sense of nothing is going to happen, so let me not say anything. And the more,
or I may be putting myself on the firing line,
yes,
so I may not get another job.
Yes,
right?
Or it may lose somebody who, even though we may be friends, they may be friends with that toxic leader or that toxic environment. So because they don't want to feel isolated, they leave me, the person who's experiencing it, to feel isolated.
Yeah, and I find what happens a lot with this is because, again, due to that small society thing where everybody's connected, you have the dual relationships and so
Yes.
on. People are fearful that they're blacklisted. They'd be blacklisted. No, you know, don't let me say
employable.
anything because, you know, if I try to go somewhere else now, they will say that, you know, I was this or that. So it is a fear of being blacklisted and blackballed in a small society like this where everybody's connected that makes people sit and suffer in silence or
Yes.
leave to resolve it rather than stand up against it. So Kimberly, this leads to my next question. In organizations where loyalty is valued, where employers or the leaders expect loyalty from employees, how does that same level of loyalty act now as a barrier to accountability where toxic leaders are concerned?
It forces employees to follow suit. Employees to follow what their leader is basically portraying. Because of fear of isolation, nobody wants to be off by themselves. So you know what? If I can't beat them, I'm gonna join them.
Yeah. I agree, because what I've found too is that there's some psychological mechanisms then that the bystanders end up engaging in, right? So that they do not, they're not ostracized, and so that they are not on the periphery. So you will find that sometimes the employees align with the toxic leader to gain favor or avoid similar negative behaviors against themselves. You may see sometimes they engage in cognitive dissonance fueled behaviors, which means really that they tend to justify then that behavior of the leader and posing it as being normal so that it does not come over that they're doing something wrong. And what that then does is it runs counter to their internal belief system. They know in their hearts that what the leader is doing is bad. They know that what they're doing is wrong, but in order to fit into that culture and to make sure they're not the ones ostracized, what they end up doing is conforming, really, right? It's a form of social conformity.
That too could be from a fear of the leader not knowing that the leader can be held accountable, or if that organization does not hold leaders accountable.
Exactly. That it drives that, right? It drives that a lot. And you will find in cultures that believe in high power distance, Barbados is a culture like that, where some believe it's inappropriate to challenge a leader. You will find that people will not speak out, because how dare you challenge the person who's at the top? How dare you speak out against the person at the top? Even although in your heart you know the behavior is unethical and unfair, how dare you do that? And then you'll find that other employees may have that same belief too.
Yeah.
It is a cultural thing, right? We're taught really not to question authority, and a whole heap of issues arise out of that whole belief in high power distance mechanisms. So I want us to now look at some signs that, or some ways that toxic leaders could tend to manipulate workplace dynamics to help protect their image, to help with that same performative leadership thing that we talked about. So we know that some toxic leaders are often highly skilled at performing professionalism in front of people who are the executives, who are on the board, right? So you will see when the board comes around, or if the board has sight of what's happening at that point, they tend to be exceptionally professional, and they speak well to the persons, the subordinates. I hate that word, but for want of a better term, they tend to do everything that is right at that time. However, behind the scenes, there are a whole lot of chaotic and toxic behaviors that are occurring. You find that they selectively manage up, meaning that they engage in a lot of flattering and so on with the executives. But in reality, all it is done is to create an impression of competence and loyalty with them, so that they hardly ever would question that toxic leader. Because after all, when they engage with me, they don't experience this, right?
Yeah.
You've seen that happen before?
Yes, I have. In my past experience, I've seen managers come in, and not even managers who were locally present all the time, and give the owners, the directors, the impression that, you know what, when they come in, these things happen. This works well. So this is how they basically justify why they should be in this role. However,
or justify why they do the things they do.
yes. However, in the background, nothing is being solved. Employees are uncomfortable. Employees leaving. Employees striking. But it's never questioned, because when that leader portrays themselves to the directors, it's something totally different to what's really going on in the background.
Yeah, I've seen that many times before. You also see them engaging in selective treatment, selective favoritism with some employees, right? Where they tend to treat some employees better than others,
Yes.
and that's the way how they buy loyalty, right? From certain employees, so that you have some loyal voices that will say, but this is not how I'm treated. So all of this is done to manage the appearances, to manage how people view them as a leader. All right, so I want to take a quick break and get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Good times, everybody. Good times for all of we. It's time to have some fun. Good times for everyone. Corn cheese steak. Lots on salted or half them mixed. I'm a nut, fruit or cashew. Barbecue steak, ain't natural rings too. Toffee popcorn, fruity popcorn, caramel popcorn. Choose any popcorn. Flavor for this, good times is number one. Get yours before they're gone. Good times, everybody. Good times for all of we. It's time to have some fun. Good times for everyone. Good times, anytime, every time. Big good times snacks. Whoa. Plug in.
This stunning set was sponsored by Abbott's. You can grab every piece at Swan Street, Sheraton, and Welch's, or shop at your convenience at abbots.bb. Thank you for rejoining us as we discuss the quality of leadership and avoiding toxicity at work and ensuring psychological safety. So, Kimberly, we ended before we went to commercial break talking about some characteristics of a toxic leader, especially ones who are very performative. And I want to pick back up that discussion by asking you to highlight for us some of the other key things that you see a type of leader like this engaging in.
So another point that comes to mind is taking ownership or praises for things that the leader did not do. So I've had an experience where I had a leader who asked for report to be completed and then sat in a meeting and took the credit for it instead of offering the credit to who it was due. Nothing is wrong with you being a leader saying, well, I had Jane Doe and John come up with the information, and this is what
our team did, right?
Yes, our team did. Instead of taking credit for something you didn't do, those things demotivate employees.
Yeah, they do. It makes people ask the question, why did they do the work?
Yep.
Because after all, I'm not going to be given the credit for the work. I've had that happen to me on a good few occasions, actually. It was the catalyst for me making some very strategic and serious decisions in my life after seeing it happen many times. I want to share for our viewers, I want to go to my notes here a bit and share for our viewers some other key indicators of a performative leader and a toxic leader, so that people can recognize it even in themselves, because we may not as leaders recognize the things that we're doing. So I just want to, if you don't mind, looking at a few of my notes on how this manifests. So you will find that this type of leader, they subtly plant narratives that discredit those who challenge them, painting the outspoken employees as difficult, uncooperative, emotional, so that people tend not to want to believe that person when they come forward to talk about something that's happened to them. You will also find that, like I mentioned slightly before, they engage in strategic favoritism. So what this would look like is that they create alliances through selective rewards, promotions, or attentions to a few, right? And by elevating certain employees to this inner circle, they secure loyalty and silence. So that person or those persons who are getting the benefits of that will be less likely to want to speak up if they see the leader behaving or engaging in behavior that is less than ideal. And this divide and rule strategy keeps the team fragmented and prevents collective resistance.
What about that leader picking on that person who spoke up through their performance reviews?
Yeah, so that's a point here. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I actually have that as a note. How they weaponize policies and they weaponize performance expectations. So just like Dr. Rochelle H. talked about that HR leader weaponizing the policies because she spoke out, I've seen that often too. What they do is they exploit the HR processes and policies, not for fairness, but they do it for control. So for example, they may initiate unnecessary disciplinary action against a person who would have spoken up against them, or all of a sudden you see the leader who, if you're a person who usually likes to put things in writing, emails and so on, they will tell you all the time, man, there's no need for the email or the thing. We can talk, give me a call or let's talk in person, right? Well, there's no need for the email. All of a sudden now, the email now becomes central to communication, and all of a sudden they're sending out this email. And the message I really want to go over clearly is that that email is really not for the two recipients in that conversation. That email is really used is to be weaponized later on to prove whatever narrative it is that performative leader is trying to spin.
I agree.
Right? And I've found that happens, and it is sometimes very glaring when they do things like that, because they make a total 360 from how they're accustomed operating. You will also find that these type of leaders, they oscillate between between charm and intimidation. So when they're in front of certain parties, they're very charming and charismatic, but then when they're talking to the underling, for want of a better word, they tend to use a lot of intimidating speech. It may not come over as aggressive because you can say the sweetest thing, or you can say it in the sweetest voice, but it could be the nastiest thing that you've said to somebody, right?
As well too.
So people believe that everything must be centered around being aggressive and speaking loudly. But sometimes the one that says the things in the sweetest, most diplomatic manner can be the one who is at the heart of all of the toxicity that is permeating in an organization. So with all of these pointers being said, I want you to tell me how or what are some of the key governance frameworks that can be used by an organization so that they understand the true reason why employees are leaving. Because you mentioned earlier about employees leaving and that is what resolves it, and that is true. Most of the time it is solved by or resolved by that employee. That particular employee resolves the issue by leaving. What are some of the structures that an organization can put in place, governance structures that can reduce the employee leaving, it being solved, by the employee leaving, and solve it at the organizational level before it gets to that?
So having guiding the persons to HR, for HR to have an investigation or a conversation to see, checking on the employees to see how things are going, see what they need to do to help fix whatever challenges the employees may be experiencing. Something like focus group conversations, where things that are said, are not judged, but you're listening to the real meat of the issues within the organization. Doing anonymous surveys, because there's not everybody you may be able to have come into a room and have a conversation, and HR being one
and
or two
be fearful
persons,
of retaliation.
True. And then you having to take notes too can be very taxing, and you're missing the quality of the information that person is putting over. So that anonymous survey, and then you go in and you pull out what are the things that the company can
themes.
do, to make the environment a very comfortable work environment. So I think those are some of the governance that can be used. There's also the wellness policy that we have here in Barbados. I think that should also be implemented within the handbook, the policies and procedures of the organization, so that the employees understand these are the things that can be done and will be done by the employer to help them, respect them, and guide them as it relates to any challenges they may be having.
So I'm glad you mentioned the national wellness policy, and we're going to talk about that a little deeper further down. But I want to hone in on something you said earlier. You talked about the things that the organization can do, and that's by involving HR. Now that will work optimally when you have a larger organization that has a structured HR department and so on. But how would an organization that is smaller, a much smaller organization, what are some of the governance things that they can put in place, governance systems that they can put in place to ensure that that one leader at the top is not the person who is being the bully, and it can lend to some accountability?
I would bring in an external party. The reason for this is so that there's no biases. That person comes in with a clear mind, basically to gather that information that is needed, and then provide the company with guidance and feedback on how we can address the challenges with the leader that we're having.
I love that in the level of independence that you spoke about, because what that does is that it takes away the overall organization having to depend on that one leader's word as this is the reason why the person left or why persons are leaving. The boards should really be the ones who look into having an independent person, because maybe the persons on the boards are busy. So perhaps, like you said, they can bring in an independent party who can have those conversations and understand why people may be leaving in droves, because there's something that has to be wrong, right?
Agreed.
And it can't always come down to it being accepted that they're being poached, right? Because who's to say that they are being poached?
Persons
right?
can tell you in the exit interview you're going to a job and they're not going anywhere because they just don't want to tell you what was the reason for leaving. So I agree.
And it comes down, as you said in the exit interview, it comes down now to them worrying that if I speak up and this leader has access to other people and other decision makers, will they blacklist me or blackball me?
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to that as to why people would not want to speak up. So it is very critical for boards, places that are run by boards or executives, to understand that there needs to be something separate and distinct from that overall leader who gets to the bottom of why you're seeing a turnover, why you're seeing people leaving in droves and so on, not just accepting the word of one person who may be central to, or maybe the catalyst for that change, those constant turnovers and changes that you're seeing in the organization.
Yeah, and I want organizations not to be afraid to do this, because it's not about getting somebody from the outside to see what are your weak points, but it's to help you strengthen your organizational culture. So don't be afraid to reach out to a third party, explain, you know what, whatever you see here is for our edification, our knowledge, whatever report you provide, and it should stay here, trusting that that person will do as such and provide the right guidance.
I agree. So you mentioned earlier about the National Wellness Program, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. So I am a chief proponent that we focus a lot on the physical safety when we talk about health and safety considerations in the workplace. But I am a chief proponent that I believe we should also be including emotional well-being and psychological well-being. So when you think about the National Wellness Policy, in what way do you believe that an organization can use that as their source of knowledge to embed the key components of that, the key elements of that, into their health and safety policy that can make the organization also focus on emotional and psychological well-being and not just the physical well-being?
I think it's first for the company to understand that the wellness of an employee should be the foundation. It's not only about safety and health within the organization, but if your employees are not mentally sound or psychologically safe, you can't expect them to perform. I had an experience where the organization I was working for did not have this, and this was before the National Wellness Policy was enacted. However, during COVID, I would have had a leader who wanted the performance of the organization, and understanding that this was a difficult time for everybody in the world. And his behaviors and actions triggered my psychological unsafety, and also my I don't want to say mental, because people see it as a negative word, but it really was. I was mentally unsafe. I wasn't sleeping, and he contacted me on my day off, expecting me to perform. Even after I explained to him that I'm going through something personally, he wasn't sleeping, and it was off. That didn't register. He screamed at the top of his lungs and expected me to perform and fix it, and hung up. And all I could have done was cry. I did not have a outlet. There was nobody. And I know people forget that HR leaders are employees too. And we too need a sounding board, and we too need an outlet. And we didn't have any wellness policy in place. I didn't have anybody to turn to at the time. Eventually, I was guided to have counseling or whatever, but I need organizations to understand that wellness policy being your forefront of your overall health and safety of your organization is necessary. You don't know what employees are going through. So to have that in your policy and guided correctly and managed correctly will help your employees feel more secure and psychologically safe.
Yeah, I thank you for being for bearing of yourself and being open about the experience you had. And I'm sorry that you had to experience that. Right? That was not good, and I can see how it could impact a person, especially if you're the type who puts it all into the job, right? So what I'm hearing from you and what we know is that when you have toxic leadership, it leads to a lot of it impacts you significantly, right? It impacts you significantly. So I want to just share some statistics, well, some information, I should say, about the real impact of workplace toxicity. So the Harvard Business Review research has shown that toxic behavior increases turnover, it reduces productivity, it can cause companies significant financial impact.
Yes.
Because after all, if people are leaving constantly, you have to hire new people, there's money to hire new people, all these things. Victims, you have to train them, so that's money to train them. Then victims have reported experiencing high levels of psychological distress, depression, burnout, insomnia, headaches, anxiety, and so on. So the list goes on and on. And what this tells me is that you have a whole heap of mental health impacts, not just the financial ones, which are critical for business, but you have the mental health impacts that can be really diminishing to the wellness of someone. And we as leaders, we need to be very careful on how we are treating people in the workplace, how we are engaging with them, and so forth. So I want to this leads me into my next question for you. So what do you think are some of the self-care items or actions that an employee who has experienced something like that and is still having the effects of it, what are some of the self-care things that they can do to help get them on the path of recovery and healing, I should say, not even recovery, but on the path of healing?
If there's no outlet within the organization, I believe that the company one should offer mental health days. Some employees may need that, or offer paid assistance as it relates to counseling. Some employees may not be financially able to do so, but these things show, one, that you care about your employee and that you care about the employee's mental safety. So allowing that employee to go to counseling, to find back themselves.
So in essence, they should seek out the counseling for themselves.
Yes.
And then the organization could accommodate.
Yes.
Accommodate it.
Yes.
So what about the ones who have already left and they've resolved their own issue by going, but even though you've left, you still feel the impacts of it.
Yeah,
you still there's times people may still wake up in the night with the anxiety from the treatment and so on. The poor treatment. So what are some of the things that person can do to get themselves back on the path of healing? So that when they go into a new organization, they go into a space free and their mind's clear and ready to start anew.
I would still suggest counseling. To get all of those things off and resolved in your mind, so you can go to your next employer, less heavy, free. some may have a friend or a counterpart they can help relate to or be a sounding board, but it is necessary to talk it through. What are some of the things you would advise an employee to do that has left the organization?
Right. They've left. Yes, the counseling is a very critical one. I am a chief proponent for counseling. It doesn't make you. I know in this society people think if you have counseling, you're mad,
Yes.
or you have mental health issues. But what it does, it is allow you to get everything that you have stored up inside out. Right. That's really what it can do. It can be therapeutic, letting you all the unresolved hurt and all of that, it lets it come to the fore, get it all out, and you can start afresh. Some of the things they can do is to spend time with the family they love.
True.
Some people find a wealth of healing in their families, spending the time with them and going out and getting fresh air, walking on the boardwalk, doing some of these mindful things, you know. They can review self-help videos, and you know there are a lot of things that they can do to bring themselves to a path of healing. And one key thing that we cannot leave out is that once they've left that organization that has caused them the hurt, they need to just say, listen, this has been an experience, chalk it up to that and put it behind them.
Agreed.
Don't go back, don't revert to studying what that organization is doing and what the people are doing, because sometimes people get stuck in that cycle of looking back at, you know, what they had to move away from and so on. But what they need to do is to make a clean break. I found that has worked for me in many instances, in all kind of facets. Make a very clean break and just forget about that.
It took me some time. It honestly took me some time to get to that point. Yeah, after, especially when you were in an organization for a number of years.
Yeah.
It takes some time to resolve it. But yes, I agree with you. Putting it behind you
makes a big
difference.
Make a clean break.
Makes a big difference.
You know, it comes down to, like, when you think about I always draw the analogy with a toxic leader, between a toxic leader, and a domestic violence relationship, right? And let me tell you how I draw that analogy. Firstly, a toxic leader behaves in the same way as a violent partner. Because what they do is that they engage in the toxic behavior, so for want of a better word, abuse you. And then they engage in some pacifying behaviors, and they engage in gaslighting behaviors. So it not only, first of all, would make you acquiesce and, you know, let down your guard with them again. That's the pacifying behaviors. But the gaslighting ones will make you question your sanity. Did I really experience this? Did this truly happen? So that is how I draw an analogy between that and the domestic violence abuser. So essentially, there's a closeness in an alignment in the toxic leader, and then how domestic violence abusers, how they operate. If you look at it, you can see the clear alignment in the behaviors. So what we'll do, we'll take another commercial break here and get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Come on, Jake. One eyeball. Wanna know go peep? Wanna gonna be worse? Peeping. Everybody peeping. Them like too much peeping. Everybody peeping. I give them one eyeball. You know got to peep. You know got to peep. You know got to peep. I give them one eyeball. You know got to peep. And when you're done.
Thank you for joining us again. We returned from commercial break, and we were talking before we went off on break about toxic leadership and psychological safety and so on. I want us to segue back to, I want to circle back to something we mentioned a bit earlier, because I feel like we didn't flesh it out enough, and I want to really help organizations to understand the importance of it. So we talked earlier about integrating psychological well-being into workplace safety and health policies and mechanisms. So share with us 3 ways or 4 ways, if you can think of them, that a company can integrate these into their workplace health and safety mechanisms and policies so that we ensure that we account for that too and not just the physical safety element?
So include statements that psychological risks in your policies, such like excessive stress, bullying, those kind of things, burnout. Include
so
those
metrics in the policy.
Yes.
That
clauses that will protect employees from retaliation should they report stuff, so that they feel safe
to actually report it.
Yes. Train your managers on emotional intelligence so that they too are prepared and given the tools necessary to manage employees and their mental and make sure that they're mentally secured and psychologically safe. The same way we have officers to go around to check on the safety and health of the organization following the Labor Act. We need to have those officers empowered to do so, to check on the mental safety of our employees. Those are the things I think we need to enact as an organization.
So personal insecurity and the ego of leaders lead to a lot of this toxic behavior that we see manifesting. What are some of the critical steps that you believe leaders can take to ensure that they're not the ones who are contributing negatively to a workplace?
I think it should be done through one-on-one conversations, taking constructive feedback from your employees. Some managers believe that they're the ones to give feedback and do reviews, but I believe in having a peer-to-peer review or manager reviewed by their subordinates. Not really like that word, but the employees underneath them. And be open to that feedback, because none of us are perfect. I think that that's one of the ways leaders can understand what they need to do to improve themselves.
Yeah, we may have the feedback, but are they going to be open to it? That's the key. That's the critical question.
Then their directors then need to ensure that when that feedback is given, it is a part of their performance review to see the change in behavior. Because some leaders believe that they are above a performance review.
Yeah, that's
and because,
true.
because I'm a manager, I've made it. But no, we all need to be open to that feedback, and our leaders need to hold us accountable to seeing that change when that feedback is provided.
I agree. So, in closing, I want you to share one final message you would like to give fellow leaders. So you're a leader too, but what you would want to give your peers regarding the importance of quality leadership and building a culture of psychological safety in the workplace.
Being a leader is not a perk. I want to start with that. A true mark of quality leadership is how people feel when they interact with you.
I love that.
Once you make a person feel comfortable and you are intentional in the things that you do, positive intentionality, not negative, and they feel safe, that makes a difference. And I think that's what we need to do as leaders.
All right, thanks for that, Kimberly.
You're welcome.
Today's discussion has made one thing very clear. Leadership is not about position, it's about impact. Toxic behaviors, whether rooted in insecurity, ego, or a lack of accountability, destroys trust, stifles creativity, and causes real psychological harm. When people feel unsafe, they disengage. And when they disengage, businesses suffer. As we close, I encourage leaders to reflect on how they show up each day. If your behavior silences voices, instills fear, it's time to change. For organizations, it's time to build strong governance systems that helps push clear accountability. Actions like enabling some form of feedback loops for employees to boards of directors while people are still employed, or exit interviews conducted by independent third parties can go a long way in surfacing the truth early on. Toxic leadership is not only a moral failure, it is a business risk. Let's commit to leading differently, leading with empathy, accountability, and respect. At Global HR and IR Solutions, we believe that leadership must be developed intentionally. That's why we created the I Am a Leader program. It is an immersive, evidence-based training experience that helps leaders strengthen self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and the skills needed to manage people fairly, effectively, and with integrity. It equips current and emerging leaders to create workspaces that inspire people to perform, not intimidate and suppress. I wish to thank my guest, Kimberly Stout, for joining me today for this very critical discussion. And thank you, viewers, for joining us on another episode of Business Matters. If you believe this program has provided you with useful information, give us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And follow us on our Instagram page so you keep abreast of all of our content. Until next time, signing off. From boardrooms to break rooms, if it's business, it matters.